What is going on, everybody? Welcome into Friday with Addison. It's been like 2 months since we've done this. Just me and y'all on the dynasty side. So hopefully, because it's Black Friday, I don't know if you guys have off of work or not, or if you are working and it's your lunch break or something like that. Hopefully, we get some people coming in here. But what's going on, everybody? How was Thanksgiving? How was football? 3 games yesterday. We got another game today in just a couple of hours, I think. Right? Yeah, they play at 3. So 3 hours from now. Should be pretty fun. But yeah. This is completely spontaneous. Just wanted to hop onto the DLF side and hang out with y'all if you have any questions, AMAs or anything like that. I know with the season starting that we've been doing the show on Friday with Paulson. That's been going great. And I do answer dynasty questions in there for sure, but I feel like that's much more geared towards start sits and that kind of stuff. So I don't want to say I've been neglecting the dynasty side of it from that show, but wanted to talk with you guys and hang out with the dynasty people. So Zach is in the chat. Zach, welcome in. He says start one running back and one wide receiver out of Jalen Waddle, Amari Cooper, Devin Singletary, and Jeff Wilson. For me, I'm going to go with Jalen Waddle and Devin Singletary. Jeff Wilson, I still don't necessarily know if I trust him to be like the backup. I feel like this is just going to be entirely a Raheem Mostert kind of game. Jeff Wilson has been a healthy scratch for like 5 weeks now, essentially, since he's like come back from being on IR. And Amari Cooper, I just don't really trust without Deshaun Watson. Like, there's no ceiling. There's a really low floor. Jalen Waddle could have a fantastic game this week against the Jets with the cover 4, cover 3 defenses that they run. His yards per route run against those types of defenses are fantastic. So today could be a Jalen Waddle game, and then I'll play Devin Singletary as well too. So yeah, Chris in a 12-team Superflex start 11. Quarterbacks are Burrow, Levis, Baker. Wide receiver Amon-Ra, Justin Jefferson, Puka, Jordan Addison, Hollywood Brown. Running backs are Gibbs, Jacobs, Gus, Keaton Mitchell. No 24 first, but you're 7-4. Do you try to trade Burrow because you're 7-4? I wouldn't be opposed to trading away Joe Burrow, but you just got to make sure that you get the proper value for him. Like, I wouldn't try to be selling low just to try to get a quarterback, essentially. I would be trying to see if you can maneuver over to guys like Justin Herbert or Lamar Jackson or CJ Stroud, or if you move down to like the Dak Prescott kind of level, which doesn't really help you this week because they played yesterday. Making sure that you're getting an adequate something on top of, because I would still take Burrow over Dak Prescott in Dynasty, because the main issue with trading away Joe Burrow right now is that I've seen people either offering really bad trades for Joe Burrow to try to steal him away for really, really low prices that are insane to try to get people that are desperate. Or those, and then what happens is if those people accept it, then they're losing out on a bunch of dynasty value and trading away Joe Burrow. And what's going to end up happening is that the season's going to end in 5 or 6 weeks. And then we're going to all be looking forward to 2024. And then Joe Burrow's value is just going to spike back up in literally 5 or 6 weeks because nobody's scoring points. Production doesn't matter. We're all looking forward to 2024. And Joe Burrow is going to be completely healthy and completely fine by 2024 and return to being a top 5 dynasty quarterback, just like he is right now. So I'm not discounting Joe Burrow whatsoever because of the injury for 5 or 6 weeks. It sucks that you're a contender, that you're 7-4 and you lost him. But Baker Mayfield, I still think, is a quality quarterback too. And if you can figure out some sort of QB1, if you don't even maybe necessarily have to trade Burrow, you could trade somebody else like, Gus Edwards or something like that for Matthew Stafford or something. I don't know. I'm just tossing out ways that you can try to take advantage of other players that are overproducing on your roster to try to just fill in a role and a position on your super flex spot, essentially, and just roll with Baker. Do you think you have a shot to win with that team at start 11? He's got to roll with Levis and Mayfield. I think you have a shot with the rest of the team that you have on there. Once Justin Jefferson comes back after the bye week next week, I definitely think that you have a shot. Amon-Ra is fantastic, of course. Justin Jefferson, when he comes back, it's going to be fantastic. Puka is solid. Addison, solid. Hollywood, hopefully solid with Kyler Murray as they kind of gel and mesh back together. Gibbs is a top 3 running back. Jacobs is a top 5 running back right now, at least. Gus has scored 18 touchdowns in 3 weeks. So I definitely think that you're competitive with the rest of your roster. Your quarterbacks obviously are your weakest spot, but if you can find somebody to just fill in or trade Burrow for the same value that he would have been prior to the injury, then I'm totally fine with that, essentially. What I would do is I would look to see who the quarterbacks are on the non-playoff teams that are already looking forward to 2024 and see if you can pull away an elite quarterback from one of them if they have one of those guys and they are underproducing. A lot of people really hate Josh Allen right now. Maybe you can sneak away Josh Allen, Burrow and Hollywood for Josh Allen, Burrow and Jordan Addison for Josh Allen. Maybe you could do something like that, depending if the Josh Allen manager is not massively competing. What's up, Genji? You are benching Waddle, Deontay, Hopkins for Dortch, Kyron, Downs, Douglas. I like the Kyron start. I love the Kyron start. I would play Waddle over Dortch. Deontay and Douglas seem very similar, but I would play Waddle. George needs 2 wide receivers out of these in a standard league: Cup, Waddle, Olave, and Tank Dell. So I would probably play Tank Dell. Dude's just red hot. He's on fire right now. Olave, I'd probably sit because it sounds like Derek Carr is going to be back, and that sucks. So I would probably sit Olave, and I would play Cup. I'd play Cup or Waddle. I'm in on Waddle today. I get it, Genji. He does nothing, but today feels like a Waddle kind of day. The fantasy points crew are in on Waddle as well today. But I would play Tank Dell. I feel like is locked in a standard league, and I would still go with Cooper Cup, assuming that he's active. But it sounds like he's going to be. The ankle injury doesn't sound all that serious. Christian, send Stroud for Burrow in a mid to late first. Absolutely. That you just got a free first round pick. Yeah. See, this is what I'm talking about with the Burrow stuff. Like, this is insane to me to drop Joe Burrow down to a level where the difference between him and CJ Stroud is a first is absolutely insane. I would still take Joe Burrow over CJ Stroud in Dynasty. Now, if you're competing and you can make that swap 1-for-1, then I'm perfectly fine with that because I view them in the same tier. They're in the same tier with, like Justin Herbert. Kyler Murray's probably in the back end of that tier as well, too. Where essentially all these guys are elite fantasy producers. Burrow and Stroud rely a little bit more on their passing numbers than they do on their rushing numbers. So they feel very similar. Burrow, obviously, though, has Jamar Chase. But we'll see if Stroud gets some more help in the draft this year. Obviously, Tank Dell's been amazing. Nico's been really solid. Having Robert Woods and Dalton Schultz and Noah Brown have been really helpful, too. And yeah, especially if you're rebuilding, this makes complete sense to just grab. I would take Burrow over Stroud in Dynasty, and you just got a free first round pick. So to me, that is a no brainer for sure. Is it showing the stream has 899,000 likes for anyone else? Dude, that'd be phenomenal. Does it really say that? Oh, it says 4. Let's get to 899,000 and we'll do something crazy. Long story short, Goff screwed me, and so did the Lions kicker in Dynasty. I have 324 first, 5 picks in the first 16. Okay. I'm following. Quarterbacks are Lawrence and Carr. What would you do with two of the top four to take the two best players available? Um, I am always take the best players available kind of guy, and it's kind of hard to say who that would be as of right now because a little bit could change here and there. But if you have two of the top four picks, assuming this is super flex, it might not be. I'm not sure. Um, if it's super flex, Caleb Williams is in that conversation with Marvin Harrison Jr. If it's not super flex, then you're looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. and Brock Bowers. And then we'll see who the wide receiver 2 actually ends up being, wide receiver 3. But it's always best player available. No matter what your needs are, no matter basically no matter what your what your need is. Obviously, if need meets with value, then that is just perfect. But gotta take best player available with the rookies, which we can definitely help you out with if you find out where these picks are at the end of the year. And as we go through the rookie process, Justin and I were just talking this morning about how excited we are for the rookie season this year. It's going to be so much fun. This 2024 rookie class looks absolutely phenomenal. The wide receivers are amazing. Obviously, we have a massive tight end prospect as well too. In Superflex, the quarterback position, we could be 3, 4, 5, 6 deep, depending on how draft capital actually ends up shaking out for some of the back end guys like Penix and Bo Nix and everybody like that. See if Quinn Ewers gets first round draft capital. Because if we get another 5 first round draft capital quarterbacks, it's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be so much fun. Jalen Warren or Jalen Waddle, the battle of the Jalens. I'm starting Waddle. I'm telling you, I'm ride or die with Jalen Waddle today. I get wanting to start Jalen Warren. If you don't want to deal with the Jalen Waddle headache and like have the anxiety of watching him today, and him potentially busting, then I get it. But I'm still rolling with Jalen Waddle. His upside is just massive today. Jalen Warren could be solid. His receiving output has vaulted his floor up very, very nicely into the double-digit range of PPR. But if he's not scoring, then it just kind of is what it is, you know. I don't know what it is, but I still just can't trust Jalen Warren specifically. Maybe it's a name thing. Maybe it's just like my how I felt about these guys prior to the season starting. I would still play Jalen Waddle, Joe. Should I trade Dell and Olave for Diggs or try Dell and Jackson Smith and Jigba for Diggs? I'm assuming this is Dynasty, in which case I would not do either one of these. The Dell and the JSN one is kind of interesting to go get Diggs, but I would not do Dell and Olave. I think there's still an argument for Olave over Diggs in Dynasty, or at the very least, they're almost back to back. Like Diggs is top 10, Olave is like back end wide receiver 1. In which case, then take Dell is not the bridge between the two. Dell and JSN, I think, makes sense to go for Diggs, but it just feels like the way that Tank Dell is on the rise right now, that with Jackson Smith and Jigba still looking solid, it's just that Geno Smith is obviously not the answer at quarterback for Seattle that we thought he was at the end of the year. If it's redraft, redraft. If it's redraft, then I would do the Dell and Jackson Smith and Jigba one for sure. Because you're not getting much out of JSN. Right now, he's just kind of clogging up the bench and he's not really doing all that much. And Tank Dell, while he's great, he could roller coaster. Yeah, I know he is putting up more points than Stephon Diggs, but Diggs has had 2 horrible weeks. But prior to the last 2 weeks, well, I can pull it up right now. I believe he was averaging like 21 points per game. So from weeks 1 through 9, Stephon Diggs was the wide receiver 3 overall, averaging 21.7 PPR fantasy points per game. And for comparison, since week 8, Tank Dell is the wide receiver 3, averaging 20.9 fantasy points per game. And yes, to top it all off, the Bills play the Eagles this week, and Diggs is going to torch the crap out of the Eagles. The Eagles' defense, pass defense, is horrible. So yes, Diggs is going to have a massive week this week. So I would trade Tank Dell and Jackson Smith and Jigba for Stephon Diggs. I'm willing to do it. Um, mm, 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 mm. You played against Deebo Samuel last night? I had him in DraftKings lineup. I was pretty happy about it. I wanted both Deebo and Ayuk. I was feeling good though by fading Ayuk until he scored the touchdown at the end with just picking Deebo. But I wanted both of them. Ayuk's been fantastic too. Dynasty Dumpster Fire, sit 1 in PPR, Dell, Saquon, Chase, and Pittman. Oh my goodness. It's so sad to me that the answer to this, I think, is Chase. I think the answer is Chase, honestly, because Jake Browning just is not it at all. Dell's on fire. Pittman is super solid, and has been still putting up back end wide receiver 1, top 15 kind of numbers with Gardner Minshew. Saquon is going to get 25 touches. I think you sit Jamar Chase and just see what happens with Jake Browning. I get that it's Jamar Chase and anything could happen, but I would just feel way more comfortable not putting trust into Jake Browning. Jamar could get 12 targets easy this week. Yeah, or he could get, and if he does get 12 targets, like 5 of them are going to be actually catchable. And he did nothing last week. He was saved by a touchdown. Jalen Wall is going to outscore Jamar Chase this week. There, I'll say it. CJ Stroud for MVP. I don't doubt it at all. He's definitely playing at an MVP level, as is Dak Prescott right now. Everybody hated Dak Prescott because the man threw 17 interceptions last year, and it was a massive outlier season for him with interceptions. And Dak Prescott, man, he's a good quarterback. People don't want to admit it. Also, as a contender in a 12-team Superflex PPR start 9, would you trade Del Monte in a second for CMC? Yes. Especially with your wide receiver room is fantastic. I mean, your running back room is also fantastic as well too. But it's Christian McCaffrey. Monty in a second, to me, I just like if you could trade Tank Dell in 2 seconds for Christian McCaffrey, you would do that every day of the week. It's Christian McCaffrey. I'm just going up and getting Christian McCaffrey. Should I start James Cook or Cortland Sutton in a PPR league? I'm so anti Cortland Sutton, but I think you have to start Cortland Sutton this week. The Eagles defense is really rough against running backs. Not that James Cook's like fantasy production has massively come from rushing. I mean, he's had 180 rushing yards over the past 2 weeks, but that was also against the Jets and the Broncos. Last time he played actually like good defenses. He only had 20 rushing yards against the Bengals, under 70 yards against the Patriots, or under 70 yards against the Bucks, under 60 yards against the Patriots. I would start Cortland Sutton. Dude scored a touchdown in 8 out of 10 weeks. There's not massive ceiling with Cortland Sutton. So I think if you need more ceiling, then I think that you would roll the dice with James Cook on that, just for the nature that he's going to get the ball more. Hopefully he falls into the end zone, especially if Josh Allen's able to take advantage of a really poor secondary for the Eagles and poor pass defense, and they get down into the red zone much more, and then James Cook's kind of able to finish off some drives. Then we could do that. Plus, if they're playing from behind a little bit more, maybe he gets a little bit more receiving work, and he gets you 6, 7, 8 fantasy points just from receiving. And then his rushing upside is just kind of the cherry on top with a touchdown as well too. So if you need ceiling, I would go with James Cook. But I think in 90% of circumstances, I'm probably just going to start Cortland Sutton this week. How do you think JT will be rest of the season? Only 2 teams for sure out of the playoffs in my league. JT is the best player to target on either team before the trade deadline. JT is a fantastic target to me. He has completely obliterated any notion that Zach Moss was going to be involved in this backfield whatsoever. I mean, even in a tough matchup against the Patriots, he had 24 touches. Um, I honestly I think that he's going to be really really good to end the year because of all of the work that he's going to get, and the fact that that Gardner Minshew is like good enough to sustain drives and get them down into the red zone, which allows Jonathan Taylor to potentially finish off drives, just like what I was talking about with James Cook. Now their schedule is a little, it's not great. It's not horrible either, though. Too. I mean, after they got Tennessee this week, not great. Cincy, Pittsburgh, these are all like completely average matchups. Atlanta's not a good matchup for running backs. But then in the championship in week 17, they get Vegas. So it's not, again, it's not horrible. It's not great, but it's very average. And I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be really, really good. What are you trying to trade for him? We can maybe try to workshop a trade. Joe, in a start 3 in PPR, DJ Moore, Hopkins, Kirk, Puka, and Thielen. Got to start 3 of these guys. I'll go with Puka, DJ Moore against the Vikings, and Kirk or Thielen. I'll go with Christian Kirk in hopefully a shootout game against Houston. DJ Moore, Christian Kirk, Puka. Vito, Shaheed or Downs off waivers. Both these guys are on waivers. I guess even in a redraft league, I feel like that's still crazy. I'll Josh Downs off of waivers. Shaheed could have an increased role with Michael Thomas injury, but if Derek Carr is playing, I don't know if that necessarily matters. His target numbers have been really weird all year. Trenton, would you trade Bijan for the 103 in next year's draft? Nope. I would keep Bijan Robinson over the 1.03. Is this one quarterback or super flex? Because it doesn't matter. I'm just curious. Because, I would take Marvin Harrison Jr. over Bijan. And if it's super flex, then I would take Caleb Williams over Bijan as well, too. Super flex. And so I would take Bijan over and too late. So you got the 1.03? Well, then you got Drake May. I would still take Bijan Robinson over Drake May. I think Drake May is a worse quarterback prospect than Bryce, Stroud. Yeah. So yeah, but I think Drake May is a worse quarterback prospect than Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. And he's a worse fantasy prospect than Anthony Richardson. And we were taking Bijan over all those guys in Superflex. And nothing has changed for Bijan in terms of my hopes of what he can become for the remainder of his career. And hopefully Arthur Smith gets fired, because if that happens, then that would be great for Bijan Robinson. But I would have kept Bijan over the 1.3. But I'm not upset about it. You traded Bryce for an early 25 pick. You're out. His team is a mess. Yeah, I get that for sure. And it sucks that they don't have a first round pick either. That was a complete catastrophe. So I'm in on trading. I'm getting out of Bryce. I'm not out on Bryce himself, but I'm in on getting out from Bryce in Dynasty. I still think I think it's just the team. Nothing to I don't think he's Kenny Pickett or Zach Wilson or any of these quarterbacks that we've seen have terrible rookie seasons, and it's like, oh, well, you could blame it on other extenuating circumstances. I think what was the problem with Kenny Pickett and Zach Wilson is that both those quarterbacks suck. I don't think Bryce Young as a quarterback is bad. I think he needs some work, but I don't think he's bad. He's still a rookie, but I don't think he's bad. He's looked very solid to me. Deontay Dortch or Pop? I'll probably go with Demario Douglas. I kind of don't really want to start any Steelers players this week. I just kind of want to see what happens. I don't know what this team is going to look like without Matt Canada. Now you could say that it's a positive, which it honestly might be, but Kenny Pickett's not good. This is the first time that we're going to have play calling duties from the who was it? The quarterback's coach, I think, is doing play calling. They did something weird where they upgraded their running back coach to the offensive coordinator position, but then I think it's the quarterback's coach that is calling plays. Something weird. So I don't know. I think I'll go with Demario Douglas, who is essentially, I think, going to be a light version of Deontay Johnson, who's just going to get a bunch of targets. And hopefully he's just a PPR guy for you. And Deontay hasn't necessarily been that for the past couple of weeks. Even though he did have 8 targets. Alex, what do you think of Kamara's value rest of season and next year? Give up Rachaad White or Hollywood for him as a contender? I was out on Kamara coming into this year. He made me look silly when he first came back. But he's just been solid. Like I think we need to. I don't expect him to be an RB1 like he was for the first 4 or 5 weeks that he was in the season. I think he's much more of an RB2. This offense is not that good. He doesn't have a bunch of touchdown opportunities in the offense. The receiving workload is nice and it's bumping him up. But I think that he's just maybe a mid to higher end RB2 who has the RB1 upside if he has a lot of receptions or does get into the end zone. Now, in terms of would you give up Rachaad White or Hollywood for him as a contender? I would not give up Rachaad White for Kamara. I would rather have White than Kamara in Dynasty. And Rachaad White has been playing fantastic. I mean, he has basically become Alvin Kamara in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense and is like 4 years younger. So I would take Rachaad White still. Hollywood, I think that that's a solid deal to trade Hollywood away for Alvin Kamara, especially if Hollywood's like your 4 or 5 and you're contending and you're trying to move forward to get a championship this year with another solid RB2 with RB1 upside, like I just said in Kamara. So I'd be fine trading away Hollywood for him. I don't think I really want to, but I'd be willing to do it. I think that's fine. I will say though, the Saints' schedule for the remainder of the year is rough. I use 4 for 4 for all this kind of stuff. Paulson's rankings are fantastic, and they're they have adjusted fantasy points allowed by opponent, which has like a heat map for the remainder of their season. New Orleans, when you look at just their 3-week stretch in the playoffs, has the 5th worst schedule for running backs. They get the Giants, the Rams, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the playoffs. Now, they do get Carolina in week 14, so he might smash the week before the playoffs. But the 3-week stretch in the playoffs right there is pretty rough in terms of matchups. Giants are nice. Rams are bad. Bucks are really bad. So there is that aspect that comes into it as well too. I don't know if you can, but the Chargers have the best schedule for I think the remainder of the season and they have it for the remainder of the season and for the 3-week stretch of the playoffs. So I don't know what I think most people would have Austin Eckler nicely valued over Alvin Kamara. So you would have to probably add more to Rachaad White or add to Hollywood to get to Eckler. But if it's not a substantial amount, I would rather have Eckler than Kamara. So alternative for you. You think you can get JT for Jordan Addison in a second? Then I would do it. I'd be willing to do that. Go get Jonathan Taylor. Jordan Addison is fantastic, but with Justin Jefferson coming back, his production could take a back seat. They still are, Josh Dobbs is good and the story's been great, but he's not like elevating wide receivers to a level that Kirk Cousins was. And he's taking away opportunities because he rushes a lot more than Kirk Cousins does. So I would be willing to trade away Jordan Addison and adding a 25 second on top to go get Jonathan Taylor. I think that's a good trade. I would do that. Kyler or Tua this week? I'd start Tua. Against a bad New York Jets team, I'd start Tua. But I think this question gets closer and closer every single week for sure. And if you're interested, I have Paulson's quarterback rankings in here as well too. He has where'd it go? Paulson has Kyler Murray ahead of Tua, but they're only separated by one fantasy point of difference. Kyler obviously has the rushing upside. Tua has the passing upside. So Paulson would say to go with Kyler, but I would go with Tua today. I'm ride or die. I'm ride or die with this Jalen Waddle stuff, guys. And Tyreek is obviously great. Thoughts on Tucker Kraft rest of season? This is an interesting trade. You lost Andrews, but you started Kraft this week. Fantastic job on your part. I honestly would not be surprised if Tucker Kraft ends up becoming, I'm not going to say what we want Trey McBride to do to end the year, because obviously Trey McBride has been fantastic. But I think Tucker Kraft could enter a realm where he is a every week kind of conversation at the tight end position, like how we talk about Evan Ingram and David Njoku and potentially even like Trey McBride. Because Musgrave's done for the year. Christian Watson looked great yesterday, but just hasn't. That was his first game all season where he actually did something. Dobbs is fine. But I think Tucker Kraft could grow into this kind of role, and be really, really good. I mean, this is only his third career game. So, and he was a third round pick as well too. So I think that he can get there for the remainder of the year. He had 2 receptions, Genji. How dare you? Love the Addison for JT trade. Community overvalues young wide receivers so much. I agree. How many receptions is Brees getting today? If you had to guess, a ton. I don't know if 10. I don't know if he's getting a 10, but he's getting a ton. I'm gonna say 7. I saw somebody on Twitter say that Tim Boyle is a better quarterback than Zach Wilson, and my initial reaction was, "Whoa!" My initial reaction was like, "That's insane." Tim Boyle is better than Zach Wilson, but then I remembered how bad Zach Wilson is. It's not necessarily out of the realm of possibilities that Tim Boyle is better. So yeah. Kevin, 12 team half PPR dynasty start 10 contender, most points for and max points for. Give T Higgins and a 24 first. Get Diggs. Oh, I'm in. Get Diggs and DeAndre Swift. May need to give a little bit more to get it done. I would give either one of those picks. I'd add both those picks, honestly, if you need to get it done. I think you because I would take Diggs over T Higgins in Dynasty, and I would take Swift over a playoff first round pick in Dynasty. So if you got to add a second or a third, or like I said, even both of those picks to get it done, I'm absolutely getting this done, and going to get Diggs and DeAndre Swift. I think it's a phenomenal trade if you can get this thing done. Traded Achane for Saquon, Kraft, and Tyler Boyd. 7-4 is contender and worried about Achane's health. I think this is a pretty solid deal. I mean, I don't really consider Kraft and Boyd to be. I know I just kind of talked up that Kraft could become something, but I said could and possibly and maybe a lot. Achane for Saquon, I think makes sense for the remainder of the year. Achane's not going to play today, and we'll see if he plays next week. Saquon is Saquon, though. And I feel like that we kind of vaulted Achane up into the top 10 so quickly, and then we vaulted him up even higher above like Saquon and Josh Jacobs and DeAndre Swift and all those guys. because of what he could potentially do in this offense. But I'm not going to label him injury prone, but it could be an issue just given his size and everything like that. If they are utilizing him more as a not between the tackles guy, but more as in a workhorse role, and they gave him more touches and stuff, a lot of which are rushing touchdowns or rushing touches. I mean, uh, that injuries could become a problem, and especially whenever he's as fast as he is, that could just open up things for soft tissue injuries and stuff, like what we've kind of like hamstring injuries could be an issue, all that other kind of stuff. That kind of becomes the Achilles heel for a lot of speedster type players. Tyreek has not had that issue. Deshaun Jackson didn't really have that issue, but we've seen other speedster type of players just kind of get killed by these soft tissue injuries. Hopefully that doesn't happen for Achane. Dude is insane. But I think Achane for Saquon makes a lot of sense as a contender for the rest of the year. And I don't think it would necessarily be all that hard to make that switch back in the offseason, especially if Saquon signs somewhere else, because he is a free agent at the end of the year. I don't think he wants to stay in New York. I don't think New York really wants to pay him either. So he could just go and sign somewhere else. And if you're signing Saquon Barkley to a multi-year, 12, 13, $14 million contract per year, you're signing him to be the RB1 of your team. So if his situation changes, and there's probably about 25 other teams minimum where his situation is going to change for the better, then we could be talking about Saquon over Achane in Dynasty in the offseason as well, too, come March and April. So, yeah, I'm all aboard it. Scott's wondering what changed with Christian Watson yesterday. Did he realize that Reed was going to replace him if he didn't show up? Yeah, to be honest, I mean, I felt like the Christian Watson breakout was going to come at some point because he was still getting targets, which was like the wild thing. Because like if you look at his game log, his first game back, he only had 4 targets, but then he had 7, 5, 8, 2, 7, 4, 7. So like he has 4 games of 7 or more targets. Half of his games he's had 7 or more targets. So the targets were there. It's just Jordan Love was not connecting with him because Jordan Love is not a very accurate passer. And so that like the deep shots just weren't there. But there was a connection yesterday. Apparently they figured it out. And he was able to get stuff done. I mean, he's still an electric player and is still the most athletic player on the team by far. Romeo Doubs didn't do all that much yesterday. It was just really Christian Watson and Jaden Reed. Tucker Kraft had the other touchdown. This is what you were hoping for if you were sticking with Christian Watson. Now, I haven't been a Christian Watson truther, but I just felt like he was getting targets and he was getting air yards. Like it had to come at some point, So it just came on a Thursday night game on Thanksgiving in prime time against the Detroit Lions. Captain is a huge fan of the stream. Already a sub. Thank you so much. Should you start Ridley or Garrett Wilson? I'll start Calvin Ridley. This is shaping up to potentially be another Calvin Ridley game as well, too. Scott Barrett was talking about that on Twitter based on defensive coverage and stuff like that. He kind of pointed that out last week as well, that this could be a Calvin Ridley week last week, and it was. And I'll start. I don't really want to trust any Jets players that's not Breece Hall. I don't even necessarily really want to trust Breece Hall. I just think he's going to see a bunch of dump off passes and be solid in the receiving game. So I'm just going to let this week play by. If I miss on Garrett Wilson, then I miss, but this could be a week where he has like 3 targets, or maybe he sees the same 8, 9 targets, but 4 of which are catchable, and he only has 2 or 3 receptions anyway, and kind of busts. Ridley's floor is also really gross, but I think his ceiling is definitely a lot higher. Like I said, it could be another Ridley week for him in a shootout matchup against Houston. So I'll start Calvin Ridley. Sorry. Start Calvin Ridley. Tommy, Breece or Bijan in your flex in a full PPR league? That's a fantastic question. Again, I don't really want to say that I want to trust Brees Hall. And I just pulled up Paulson's rankings to see if he was going to give me a tiebreaker, and he didn't because Brees Hall is RB11 and Bijan is RB12, separated by zero point 0.1 fantasy points in his projection. The Brees has a tougher matchup against Miami. But again, like I said, he could see dump off passes because the Dolphins are just going to smack the Jets. And if they're playing from behind and Tim Boyle is getting pressured and he's not able to throw intermediate to deep passes, then he could just give a lot of dump off passes to Brees Hall. And Paulson does have him projected for more receptions than Bijan. Bijan just has a slightly nicer matchup against New Orleans. So there's that. I think I would still go with Brees Hall, though, for the receiving upside. In a full PPR, I'll go with Brees Hall for the receiving upside. The second question for same team as before. 12 team half PPR, Superflex contender. Give Young and a 24 first and get Dak Prescott. Your other quarterbacks are Mahomes, Murray, and Carr. So I would do Young and a 24 first for Dak Prescott, especially if that's your first as a contender. I'm just going to assume it is. I'm not sure if it is or not. But if it's a late first and Bryce Young, I would trade that for Dak Prescott. But there is also something to be said of, do you need to do that? Because you already have Patrick Mahomes. Kyler Murray is good too. So, and I get that you would probably play Dak over Kyler Murray for the remainder of the year. Dak's schedule is really great. Kyler's is really great as well, though, too. But Dak is just on fire, playing at an MVP level. So then you would have to be benching Kyler Murray. So you could do this deal and then try to see if you could swap out Kyler Murray for something. Like if you could move Kyler for Anthony Richardson in a second or something like that. So then you still maintain the high end upside of a Russian quarterback as a game breaking Konami code quarterback, and you get something on top. Or you could move from Murray down to some other QB3 that's a better upgrade from Derek Carr. You could do that as well too. But I don't know. It's just something about having 3 top 10 dynasty quarterbacks. It feels superfluous. And if you are able to maximize or able to take advantage of that value to move it to somewhere else on your team, then you could do that too. And maybe there's another way to use that first round pick to upgrade some other position rather than upgrading your potentially QB3 or QB2. You know what I mean? You could even do Murray in a first and go up and get Josh Allen. Could you do that? I think that would be a better utilization of the first round pick than Young in a first to go up and get Dak. I think there might be different options for you with your first round pick than just doing this. But again, like I said, I would trade Young in a late first to go get Dak Prescott. That trade in a vacuum, very good. I will go do that and get Dak. But I don't know if you necessarily need to. There might be other use cases for that first. 16-team Superflex IDP League got an offer to give up Swift for Saquon straight up. I hate 1-for-1 same position trades with a passion. I would keep DeAndre Swift. I would just keep DeAndre Swift. His schedule is fantastic for the remainder of the year too. Give me DeAndre Swift. George is in a redraft league. He's 9-2 already in the playoffs. Awesome job. His wide receivers are Kupp, Waddle, Olave, Dell, Deontay, and JSN. Should you trade Olave for Jefferson or Dell for Jefferson? I would trade Olave for Justin Jefferson. Keep Tank Dell. If you're able to trade Olave for Justin Jefferson, that'd be fantastic. I had high hopes for Olave with Jameis Winston in as the quarterback, but it seems like Carr is going to play this week. It seems like he's gotten out of the concussion protocol, and the Saints are going to stick with him. Why? I have no idea, but it just seems like that's what they're going to do. And Carr has been terrible for Olave for a large majority of the year. Winston would have at least been a different spark of like, I'm willing to throw the ball no matter how covered you are. I'm a maniac. I'm insane. I will throw the ball deep and I will give you opportunities. And so that would have been good for Olave. But um, doesn't sound like that's going to be the case with Derek Carr at quarterback. So I would trade Olave for Jefferson. I would probably also trade Tank Dell for Jefferson as well too. But if you have a choice between these two, I would trade Olave. I mean, I'd trade Olave and JSN too if you had to go get Jefferson and keep Tank Dell. Frostbane, Gabe Davis or Rashid Shaheed starting over Garrett Wilson this week. I think that they're both interesting players. Again, this is I don't think Garrett Wilson has a ceiling that either one of these two guys have, but I do think that Garrett Wilson has a more stable target share, or at least should have a more stable target share than both of these guys. Davis obviously has the ability to score 25 fantasy points any given week, and he also has the ability to score 2.5 fantasy points any given week. Rashid Shaheed as well. Shaheed, again, it sucks because of Derek Carr. That's essentially what's killing every single one of these Saints wide receivers is Derek Carr. So, like prior to this week, when he had 9 targets, but a majority of those were with Jameis Winston, he had 3 targets and 3 targets. Now, the 1 3 target game, he converted all 3 of those for 150 yards and a touchdown. So he kind of Randy Mossed you for a little bit, but his target share has just been so up and down. And he's had multiple games where he's been under 35 yards. And that floor is just so terrible. I think if you were to start either one of these two guys, I would go with Gabe Davis against Philadelphia this week over Garrett Wilson today, especially if you need upside and a home run hitter. But if you just want somebody to get you 10 fantasy points, I think that would be Garrett Wilson. I think Garrett Wilson has a better opportunity to get that. But I'd be willing to start Gabe Davis. I think it's worth it as long as you don't need a donut. Murray Young in a first should get you Allen. If you have Kyler, you have no reason at all to trade up for Josh Allen. Well, that's what I think. If you can take advantage, people are really low on Josh Allen right now because the Bills haven't been doing that well. But Josh Allen is still Josh Allen at the end of the day, especially for fantasy. Like everyone wants to tell me that even if a quarterback isn't good in real life, that they can still be good for fantasy. Whenever we're saying to sell Jordan Love because he's not a good quarterback. That's what everybody's telling us. And it's the same exact thing for Josh Allen. I mean, Josh Allen is the quarterback 1 in fantasy football right now, averaging 23.5 fantasy points per game. And people are down on him because his real life, like the team in real life, is not as good. And Stephon Diggs hasn't been good. I would trade a late first in Kyler Murray and just go get Josh Allen. I get that Kyler has a bunch of upside, but Josh Allen is already doing it and has been doing it for like 3 years in a row. So I would be willing to move up from Kyler to go get Josh Allen and just solidify the fact that you have 2 top 3, if not top 2, dynasty quarterbacks for the next 8 years and be done with it. Christian, would you trade away Waddle for Garrett Wilson as a rebuilder? Yes. Because here's the point with this is that Garrett Wilson has alpha wide receiver target hog upside that Jalen Waddle hasn't had since Tyreek Hill came to town. And Tyreek apparently is playing for another 2 years. So he's just the target share is just not there for Jalen Waddle, but it is there for Garrett Wilson. And especially if it seems like Aaron Rodgers is going to come back, maybe not this year, but it seems like he's going to come back next year and he's going to have like the biggest chip on his shoulder. Like he might have like a whole stack of Pringles on his shoulder trying to prove everybody wrong, essentially, like, and if that's the case, Garrett Wilson is going to be phenomenal next year. So I would trade away Waddle for Garrett Wilson because I think Garrett Wilson has the ability to get to 160, 170 targets easily. That what Jalen Waddle just doesn't have. And you're relying more on efficiency with Jalen Waddle. So I would take Garrett Wilson as a rebuilder. If you're able to trade away Waddle for Wilson plus. Like if you can get anything on top of Garrett Wilson, it's an automatic win. Even if it's a 3rd round pick, if it's a handcuff running back, if it's this wide receiver 3 on a team but is in free agency next year, or somebody above him is entering free agency, like, you know, Josh Palmer, maybe. I don't know, something like that. Could be interesting. Anything on top of Garrett Wilson is a smash for me. But I would take Garrett Wilson straight up over Waddle. You're having a fun debate with your league in a 14-team Superflex IDP auction, $1,000 salary and 125 contract years. Puka is $1 and signed for 4 years. Would you trade the 101 for Puka on that contract? No, because I get it. That contract is insane. But I think it would just be worth it to get Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison Jr. still. What is the contract for that? Like I'm assuming you have designated like salaries and contracts. Like it's a 4-year deal for the 101 at what contract? I'm just curious what that, like how much of a difference is that between what Puka has as $1? $75. Oh my goodness, that's a massive difference. But I still think it's worth it though. I still think it's worth it. But that, man, I was expecting you to say like 30 or 40. It's double what I had in my head. $75. But I guess that makes sense though, because then you got to scale down from there. And Puka was probably a 4th round pick next year or last year. I get the argument for wanting to have Puka over the 1.01, but I still think I just take Marvin Harrison Jr. or Caleb Williams. I still think it's worth it, but I get it. Man, that's fun. I like it. Garrett Wilson or Olave in Dynasty? Garrett Wilson. Similar argument, like the pro argument for Garrett Wilson and Olave, or Garrett Wilson in Dynasty. Sorry, my brain works way too fast and thinks too fast. The pro argument for Garrett Wilson in Dynasty is exactly what I just laid out, that he has the alpha wide receiver 1 target hog ability with potentially Aaron Rodgers coming back in 2024. Olave also has that as well, but the issue is that they do not have a quarterback waiting in the wings that has massive upside potential to get Olave to that point, like Garrett Wilson does with Aaron Rodgers. God forbid that they stick with Derek Carr again next year. But even if they draft a quarterback, it's not going to be Caleb Williams. It's going to be some other rookie, or maybe it's a bridge quarterback. And it's just, I put more trust in Garrett Wilson's ability with Aaron Rodgers, of course, obviously, but I think that you're just going to enjoy Garrett Wilson more in the short term than you will Olave. So I'll take him over Olave in Dynasty. Jose, 12-team PPR, just traded Mixon for Waddle. Burrow's injury worries me, and I already have Etienne, Kamara, and Kyron Williams. I'm assuming this is in redraft, in which case I also like it as well too, especially with those other running backs. Like you have a top 5 running back in Etienne. Kamara, as we just mentioned, is it's like a mid to high end RB2 with RB1 upside. Kyron Williams hopefully comes back and is what Kyron Williams was prior to the injury, getting just a massive workload. He gets Arizona this week. That's going to be really nice. And Waddle is going to be a top 10 wide receiver this week. Today. Book it. But I like it. No, I do think that there it is. 30 points for Brees and Waddle today. Love it. But yeah, I do agree. I don't know what Burrow's injury is going to necessarily mean for Joe Mixon. It might mean more receptions, kind of like what we're talking about with Brees Hall with Boyle now, with Jake Browning in. but it's also going to probably come with a lot less efficiency. That offense is probably just going to suck. And Mixon's going to be rough. Waddle at least has a ton of upside that if you can kind of, I mean, I don't know if you want to start him every single week. He might be a starter every single week. Uh, but I think just it's still Jalen Waddle, you know. Thanks for the Kamara advice. Start 2 of the 3: Derrick Henry, Rashad White, Jamar Chase. I will start. I feel like Rashad White is just kind of locked in for the week, just because I mean he's been playing at such a massive, insane level that I would start Rashad White. I would also start Derrick Henry against Carolina. That might be just an insane game for him. Carolina is like one of the worst rushing defenses in the league. And Will Levis has not looked good since his first game. So if they're not able to pass on Carolina all that much, but they're leading for a good majority of the game, it'll probably be mostly because of Derrick Henry, and he's gonna have a monster game. So those are the two that I would start: Derrick Henry and Rashad White. And if you're curious, to back that up with John Paulson in flex rankings, Derrick Henry is 22, Rashad White is 25, and Jamar Chase is 45. So Paulson's got my back on that one too. All right. Where are we at? PPR scam Rashad White. That's essentially like he's partly a wide receiver right now, which is crazy. He has what is this average right now over the last 5 games? Over the last 5 games, he's averaging 5 receptions per game, which is a 17-game pace of 85 for almost 900 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not to mention he's also scored 3 touchdowns on the ground as well too. And hasn't been good on the ground, but he's getting a ton of volume. And he's on pace for 85 receptions over the last 5 games. Oh my goodness. This is the power of pass catching and why Breece Hall is going to score 30 points today. Element, Tank Dell or Puka Nacua? I'll go with Tank Dell. You could also put Mixon in there. No, I'll still go with Tank Dell. Just riding the hot wave, the heat wave of Tank Dell, and what it should be another good matchup against the Jaguars. And I'm hoping for a shootout game in that one as well too. And again, for backup, Paulson has Tank Dell as the flex 13 overall. Puka is flex. Puka has 8 overall. Paulson doesn't have my back on that one. But Mixon is 31. So Mixon's not involved in this, but I would start Tank Dell over Puka as well. Paulson would start Puka over Tank. I'd start Tank. Trenton, Pacheco in the flex or Cup if healthy for point per first down, not PPR. Interesting. I would go with Cooper Kupp. Rashad White's been fine. Not Rashad White, Jesus Christ. Isaiah Pacheco has been fine. And he gets a good matchup against Vegas this week. But at the same time, like if Cooper Kupp is healthy, I think that he's going to have not like a comeback game, but I mean, it's Cooper Kupp at the end of the day. And it has been rough, but the last time they played Arizona, he had 7 for 148 and 1 earlier this year with a healthy Kyren Williams, with Matthew Stafford. So I would start Cooper Kupp over Pacheco. How are we feeling about Eckler this week? Tough matchup against the Ravens, dude. I actually had somebody ask me if I would rather have or start Josh Dobbs over Herbert this week because of that matchup. I think that what I'm hoping for is that this game actually ends up being a shootout, so that we kind of get points on both sides, and Brandon Staley is playing for his job, so he kind of just lets Herbert uh, rip it out there. And if that's the case, I mean, I don't want to call Eckler matchup proof, but I mean, he kind of is to a certain extent because of all the volume that he's going to get, especially with the receiving volume that he should get. And hopefully he finds the end zone as well. So I think that we need to readjust expectations and not say that he's like a bona fide RB1 this week, but he's still a top 15 running back and has RB1 upside if he's catching over 5 receptions, if he finds the end zone. Um, he still has that ability. So, um, you're starting him for sure, but again, I wouldn't view him as an RB1 specifically, but he still has that upside. You started Josh Jacobs and Eckler last week and lost your first place spot because of that. Uh Man, I'm sorry. um Jacobs last week was rough though. It's the same, that offense is just, it sucks because these offenses are taking down these really good uh running backs. But 6 points from Jacobs is not going to help you. 7 points from Eckler, not going to help you. But I don't know, like, who else do you have on your roster that you would even want to start over any of those guys? I can't imagine starting somebody over Josh Jacobs or Austin Eckler. I mean, you probably, like, there's an argument for it, especially based on last week, but I can't imagine doing that. Single quarterback redraft. Would you trade for Kyler or just go with Minshew the next 2 weeks, then stream? Um, I would trade Hopkins for Kyler because Hopkins is going to be dust by 2024, or especially by 2025. And I feel like you kind of overvalue, or I feel like people undervalue quarterbacks in one quarterback, especially when that quarterback has the ability to have like massive Konami code upside, like Kyler does, um, which is just going to help you even in one quarterback. And it takes off so much weight off of your mind every single week by just not having to start about who you're starting at quarterback this week and just start Kyler Murray. So I would trade Hopkins for Kyler. If you got to add a third or a couple thirds, I mean, I would add a second. I'd go up to a second. Hopkins in a second for Kyler. I'd do that too. Thoughts on Keaton Mitchell and Dynasty? Just a flash in a pan, or a solid role player going forward? I wish that he was more than a flash in the pan. And I think the Ravens want him to be. But my fear with the Ravens offense is that they are one of the teams that actually end up being a suitor for a rookie running back next year. And if that's the case, if they draft somebody early on day two, kind of like what they did with J.K. Dobbins back in 2020, even though this running back class doesn't necessarily look great, there are definitely still names that will fit very nicely in this Ravens offense that still match up as top 50 picks overall. Like if they go and they draft Travion Henderson, even if they draft Braylon Allen or Raheem Sanders, honestly, any one of those three guys, I think would all be fantastic in that Ravens offense. Um, and if that happens, then Keaton Mitchell's value goes the way of Justice Hill. um, so I'd be willing to trade out of Keaton Mitchell if you get a second. If you get anything less than that, I'm not trading out, but I would sell out for a second for Keaton Mitchell. It just doesn't seem. I think they would like him to be, but I don't know. It just doesn't. It doesn't feel like he's going to be a long term thing. ETN or Pacheco or Barkley in a non PPR pick 2 in a standard league. So ETN for sure locked in. Rolling with Travis Etienne, and then I would go with in a standard league, Barkley or Pacheco. What does Paulson say about this? Paulson has Etienne as RB3. So yeah, that one was locked in. He's got Pacheco as RB13, and he's got Saquon as RB6. I actually scrolled past him. So Paulson would say Etienne and Saquon. and then Pacheco's down a little bit more. I think with Saquon, you're just trusting the volume that he's going to get. Dude's going to get 18 plus carries, probably another 4 or 5 receptions, if not more. So ETN's for sure lock. Barkley then would be the second one. Jahmyr Gibbs. Should the Lions trade Monty? I think they should trade Monty. I think they could seriously roll with Jahmyr Gibbs as the RB1 and pick up somebody else to fill the David Montgomery role that isn't costing them a whole bunch. Or as much as what David Montgomery is. Like we're seeing like like you can get a guy like Devin Singletary who can fill in a spot start. Zach Moss can fill in a spot start. Like it's kind of like the RBs don't matter conversation. I would start Jahmyr Gibbs. Are you asking to start Jahmyr Gibbs over Eckler or Jacobs though? Because I would do that. I would probably start him over Jacobs. He played yesterday. You can't even. Never mind. But yeah, I think that Jahmyr Gibbs should be the focal point, but I'm not a coach and I do not make decisions. But I think he should. And I think they should trade Monty and then just get somebody else to fill that role. Dynasty Superflex trade Chase and a second for the 101 Rashad White and Jake Ferguson. Oh my goodness. I'll still take Jamar Chase. Because I would take Chase. See, the interesting part of this is I feel like most people would say that Chase and the 1.01 are very, very close, whether that's Marvin Harrison Jr. or Caleb Williams is very close in value to the point where you're definitely taking Rashad White and Ferguson over a second. But I don't know. I just value the security of Jamar Chase over a rookie who, like Caleb Williams, might not even declare. That would be an issue. Marvin Harrison Jr. could get drafted by Atlanta, and then that would be an issue. So where you just want Jamar Chase, who has Joe Burrow next year. I think that there's more value and security in the known asset of Jamar Chase than there is with the 101 and Rashad White and Ferguson and stuff. And you get a second round pick. You get to keep the second. I would keep Jamar Chase, but I get it. Your starter is Monty and Austin Eckler. So I would, man. Monty and Jacobs are very similar. Monty did solid yesterday, so that's good. I'd start Eckler. I'm sorry you're in that situation. I would start Eckler. Hope for a shootout. Hopefully Eckler does well. Ridley, Pollard, and Olave for Chase. Been trying to get Chase for a long time. His manager will make me pay up. I would pay this to go to Jamar Chase. Yeah. Go get the wide receiver 2 in Dynasty. Potentially even the wide receiver 1, depending on what happens with Jefferson. Not with Jefferson, but like with Kirk Cousins, I guess, more or less. I would pay that to go get Jamar Chase, though. You're also consolidating down your roster, which allows you to either add players off the waiver wire easier or open roster spot for more rookies. I just like consolidating at the wide receiver position. So I'll take Chase. 1 second, Nick. Water. Am I crazy to want to start Flowers over Olave this week? Is Flowers playing? I thought I did see that he was back at practice today. Zay Flowers present for practice today. So I would play Zay Flowers over Olave, assuming that Flowers is playing. 10 minutes ago, he says in the locker room, I feel good. I feel great. I'm ready to go get this win. So I would play Flowers over Olave. I'm going to assume that he's playing and probably is. Trying to get Josh Jacobs was going to offer Keaton Mitchell Myers in a late first. Think that's too low. I personally think it's too low, but the way that some people value Josh Jacobs, some people value Jacobs as just the first. So the extra sweetener of the upside shot of Keaton Mitchell, the solid wide receiver 3/wide receiver 2 with Jacoby Myers. Um, some people might view that as a pretty solid like sweetener on top of the first. I would pay that to go get Josh Jacobs though. Christian, how do you approach doing a 1-year retool? Got a team with a bunch of aging assets that are still producing, but don't want them to die on my roster in a year or two. Yeah. So essentially, when you have a team with a bunch of aging assets, you're just trying to find ways to like maintain production, which might be hard given if you have like Stephon Diggs or Cooper Cup and some of their production could be kind of off the charts and crazy. Um, but if you But the main goal is to just basically try to find swaps to flip from those old aging assets to players that are either ascending or players that are just as productive as those aging assets now. So, for example, if you have Stephon Diggs, can you flip him and get to Brandon Ayuk or flip to Garrett Wilson? Essentially, that is kind of like the moves that I would be looking to make right now. And it might make sense, especially if you have a good trade partner that's in the opposite direction of where you're heading, right? So if you have a bunch of aging assets as a rebuilder with those aging assets, or if you're middle of the pack with aging assets, find the contenders that have younger assets that aren't necessarily helping them out a whole bunch right now, and that's a perfect swap that you can make right now. Or those middle of the pack teams that think they're still contenders and they're trying to push to get into the playoffs to then make a championship run once they get into the playoffs. Those like 7 or 8 seed kind of people who are like only a game out, they might also be good teams to take advantage of to basically get younger. And then that helps you out more in the long term too. If you have running backs, then you could shift your value to a more stable position like the wide receiver position or even tight ends or use them to upgrade at quarterback or something like that too. Essentially, I'm just trying to shift assets into younger and more stable positions than those aging assets. You don't have to trade all of them. So like if you still have Stephon Diggs and you're not getting good value for him, then you could keep him because he's still going to be great next year. But if you have players like Cup and Adams and DeAndre Hopkins or Tyler Lockett. Some of them might be harder to trade, especially because of the age and their production isn't off the charts, making them super valuable. But I would be trying to trade those guys to get younger and hopefully maintain production. Sean, what's up? How's it going? It's going good for me. Awesome day yesterday. Hopefully you guys had awesome days as well too for Thanksgiving. Kurt in a 12 team Superflex 1 PPR pick 3 out of Raheem Mostert, Swift, Cook, and Hall. So Swift and Mostert are auto starts. I'll go with Brees Hall over James Cook. Mostert, Swift, Brees Hall. What are your thoughts on this upcoming wide receiver draft outside of Marvin Harrison Jr.? This wide receiver draft class as a whole, when you include Marvin Harrison, might be the best wide receiver draft class we've had since like 2014. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, analytically, Marvin Harrison Jr. is obviously at the top. Malik Neighbors looks fantastic. Troy Franklin is an analytical darling. I was gonna comp him to like Josh Downs or Sky Moore, which is not very favorable comps right now, but like analytically, he looks fantastic. And is definitely a different player than those guys as well too. So he's got a lot of upside. Keon Coleman, Amiga Egbuka, Xavier Worthy. Like, you have a bunch of guys who are prototypically sized wide receivers, which is different than what we've had for the past couple of classes. You have a lot of guys that have been massively productive over the past couple of years, a lot of early declares, and a lot of just, it's going to be so much fun. Like, I would not be surprised at all in Superflex rookie drafts if like 8 or 9 picks in the first round are wide receivers. Would not be surprised if we see 4 or 5 wide receivers being drafted before the first running back. And this class is going to be phenomenal. I'm so excited to dive into this wide receiver class. Once we get into January and February, because I think it's going to be so much fun. I have so much hope and excitement for this wide receiver class. Action Jackson with a $5 super chat, man. Thank you so much. He's saying in a 12-team start 9, Russ or Carr at Superflex. And then we got to pick 2 flexes out of Evans, Pittman, Mostert, Mixon, and Pacheco. Big playoff implications here. All right, we can't get this wrong. So at the Superflex position, I will go with Russell Wilson. I feel like that's a pretty easy call over Derek Carr. Carr just does not have any upside whatsoever, and his floor is not great either. So I'll go with Russell Wilson in the Superflex spot. Now pick 2 for the flex out of Evans, Pittman, Mostert, Mixon, and Pacheco. I think I'm going to lock Mostert in as the running back. He's going to see a massive amount of touches, and because Achane is not going to play today. So I will trust in Raheem Mostert today in terms of the touch floor and security that he's going to get over all the other wide receivers, over the wide receivers, and then the other 2 running backs as well. Then for the second flex, I think I'm going to go with Mike Evans. Similar upside, I think, to like the fact that he's like more of an upside player, but his floor has also been phenomenal as well. And he is the, I mean, it's not like crazy to say it or whatever, but like he is the wide receiver 1 in Tampa, and he has produced phenomenally. I mean, he's been above 12 fantasy points in a PPR league in each of the past 5 weeks, and he's been over 20 in 2 of those 5 weeks as well too. So I think Mike Evans is my other start. Now let me see. I will vet this against John Paulson's rankings. So Paulson has Mostert as flex 28. He's got Evans as flex. Where'd he go? Flex 18. So he's got Evans higher than Mostert. Pittman is flex 27. So he's right next to Raheem Mostert. Mixon is flex 31. So a few spots behind Mostert and Pittman. And then he's got Pacheco at 24, which is actually ahead of Mostert. But I would still go with Raheem Mostert with Achane being out. And then he does have Mike Evans as the highest ranked flex spot out of all these 5 guys. So for me, Evans and Mostert, Russell Wilson at the Superflex. And good luck, dude, with your with the week this week. Hopefully you get the dub for playoff implications. Hopefully we hit on that right for you. Kyle on YouTube, 10-team half PPR Superflex rebuilding. Would you trade away Puka, Tank Dell, McBride for Laporta, JSN, Downs, second and 2/3? You could get DK over Downs, but no second then. No. I want Puka, Tank, and McBride. There's no reason whatsoever as a rebuilding team to trade those guys away. I would take Puka and Tank Dell over JSN and Downs, and I would take Laporta over McBride, but I don't think that one position is a massive difference for you in this deal, to where all the value of Puka and Tank Dell over JSN and Downs is the second and the thirds don't really mean anything to me. Yeah, I'm keeping Puka, Tank, and McBride. Jose's got to start 2 in a PPR: Waddle, Pittman, and Kyron Williams. I'll go. I'm telling you guys, I'm living and dying with Waddle today. Kyron Williams to me is a start. He is the locked in one, and then between the 2 wide receivers, I would start Jalen Waddle, but I have no issues whatsoever if you don't want to start Jalen Waddle and just starting Michael Pittman. I think Pittman is just as good of a start as well. So if you don't want to deal with the headache of potentially having a bust game from Waddle and it being a Tyreek Hill game, then start Pittman. I think he's just as good of a start. But Kyron is a locked in one. Sebastian, start 2 PPR: Breece Hall, Chris Olave, Kyron Williams. Again, I'll lock in Kyron Williams, and then I'll go with Breece Hall as the other one too. Running backs, touch floor. And with it being PPR, again, I've mentioned this multiple times today, but I think Breece Hall is going to have a bunch of receptions. Appreciate all your insight and content. Absolutely. Thanks for the question. Thanks for hanging out. Scoff, regarding the other retooling question, how do I know when to jump off the Christian McCaffrey ride? When your team isn't contending anymore. Christian McCaffrey is so freaking good. I honestly, the only way that I can imagine even trading him would be as if you get Bijan plus Brees plus Gibbs plus. And I'm not saying that I would rank him as my dynasty RB1 because there is that age that comes into it. But if you already have CMC, there is no reason whatsoever to move him for any other player unless you're getting Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. And that's or a quarterback, like a top 8 quarterback. Um, because he's just so freaking good. So, um, I would probably those would be the only players that I'd be looking to trade CMC for if you're trying to retool and you're trying to get younger. I would go look at the Justin Jefferson manager, look at the Jamar Chase manager. The Chase one might be the uh most available option for you because of Joe Burrow's injury. You might be able to squeak away Jamar Chase for CMC, and I'd be willing to do that. Um, or if you're able to pull away Burrow himself, might be another good one, or Herbert, Kyler. Those are the guys that I'd be looking for to trade away CMC. But you have no reason whatsoever to trade him away unless your team is absolutely garbage. But if you sounds like if you're retooling, it sounds like you're in the middle of the pack. Maybe you realize that this year isn't necessarily your year, and you're trying to look forward to 2024 and build your team out. Then I would keep CMC, unless, like I said, you get something crazy for him. Yeah, you already have Bijan. Then your running backs sound like they're locked and loaded. So it's probably your other positions and stuff too that just need a little bit of a flip. But yeah, there's no reason to trade CMC. Price check on Mark Andrews in a 2 PPR tight end premium league. Mid first seems low, but there's more tight ends of value in the league right now than a few years ago. A mid 2 tight end premium. So 2 PPR tight end premium is an insane point premium for tight ends. I would have him over a mid first. I would want him over Brock Bowers. So essentially, I feel like that's a good barometer for tight ends this year is would you rather have Brock Bowers than this player? Because Brock Bowers is probably going to end up being in a Superflex league a top 5 pick in rookie drafts. So would you rather have Mark Andrews or Brock Bowers? If you choose Andrews, then that means that he's worth more than a top 5 pick. I understand if you're like rebuilding, maybe it makes more sense to then get Brock Bowers because of the age difference and whatnot. But that's essentially my barometer in this year. It's made it really easy by having Brock Bowers. So I would keep Mark Andrews over a mid first. If you get a first and McBride, then that would be great. If you get a first and Evan Ingram, then I would do it. If you get a first and I probably wouldn't do it for Njoku. Probably wouldn't do it for Komet. Kittle. I probably would do it for Kittle. I just traded away Kittle for Andrew straight up in a Trade Addicts league yesterday or 2 days ago. One or 2 days ago. Goddard and a first would be a smash. Again, these are all the tight ends that you can get down from Mark Andrews by adding a first to. But I probably wouldn't do it for like Freiermuth or Njoku or Schultz or anybody like that. I'd probably keep Andrews over all them. But yeah, Andrews over first. Matthew, in an 18 Superflex, are Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, Kirk Cousins, and Russell Wilson enough to compete in 2024? I think it's based on your belief of Anthony Richardson and your belief of what Kirk Cousins will be whenever he comes back and if he's back on the Vikings or not. Because theoretically, if Anthony Richardson is a top 10 fantasy quarterback next year, if not even top 5, based on what he did in the 2 like complete healthy games that he basically played this year, then he would be a massive piece for you as your quarterback 1. If Kirk Cousins comes back and he's on the Vikings and he's healthy, he's got Justin Jefferson, then I think that he'd be just as good of a quarterback 2. I'm not really considering Bryce in this equation. Russell Wilson, I think, would be fine as a QB3. I don't know if like in an 8-team super flex if Russell Wilson is an adequate enough quarterback to compete with, because there's going to be a bunch of other teams that have um, Herbert and Kyler, or Mahomes and Lamar, or Allen and Burrow. Like that's just going to happen in an 8-team league. Which I'm sure you probably, by me saying that, you have thought of the team or two that already have those quarterbacks. So competing with them is going to be hard unless you have amazingly insane running back, wide receiver, tight end spots. But again, in an 8-team league, most teams probably have really strong running back, wide receiver, and tight ends as well. So this is more based on your belief of who Anthony Richardson can be next year and how well Kirk Cousins is going to produce coming back from injury and on what team, because he's a free agent and he might not be back in Minnesota. And me personally, I don't think it's enough, but it could be. It's on the border. I wouldn't feel comfortable with it trying to compete in 2024 right now. I wouldn't feel comfortable. I'd be trying to do something. Upgrade your QB1 spot or QB2 spot. Become one of the teams that has Burrow and Herbert, or Mahomes and Kyler, or become one of those teams. Brendan's asking Kittle's value in a non-tight end premium, Kittle and Cooks for a mid first or 26 first. I would be willing to trade out of Kittle for a first. I don't really consider Cooks all that much in this deal. But again, if you're using the Brock Bowers barometer, I would take Brock Bowers over George Kittle. So if that mid first ends up being Brock Bowers, or one of the amazing wide receivers that we're going to get in the class next year, then I would be willing to take that over George Kittle. I probably wouldn't trade Kittle for a 26 first, though. I feel like you can get more. It's too far out right now for Kittle. And then in a 12-team Superflex half PPR start, 9, Purdy and Njoku in a second, or Andrews in a late first. Ooh. I'll take Purdy in this. I think just having the quarterback on one side increases the value a lot. But I think this is a very fair trade for sure. I would take Purdy over Andrews, but I would take the first over Njoku in a second. So that's what makes it very fair, in my opinion. But I think I just prioritize the quarterback a little bit more in Superflex, especially with Andrews' injury. I'll take Brock Purdy. You'll probably have Drake May then. Have to draft Drake May then as a hopeful solution. Yeah, but then the issue with drafting Drake May is then he becomes your new Bryce Young. Like, he could be a quarterback that just doesn't really do all that much for you, and is now another roster spot that you're using on a mid-tier quarterback that is not getting thrown in your starting lineup all that much. And ultimately does not help you compete because he's not doing anything for you, just sitting on your bench. And you haven't solved any of the other issues of upgrading your quarterback 1 or your quarterback 2 spot. Now, May could turn into something, but I think he's a worse quarterback prospect than Stroud and Young were. And so I don't have a massive amount of trust. But you never know. I mean, Justin Herbert kind of came out of nowhere. And people weren't saying that Herbert was some massively great prospect as well, too. I get Herbert vibes from Drake May. But he could just be another, because he's a rookie quarterback, he doesn't do all that much. He's still getting integrated into a new offense in the NFL, blah, blah. That could just be another issue for you. It might be better to use that first and pair that first with Bryce Young and maybe even with Russ, and just use all 3 of those pieces and go and get, Burrow or somebody like that. That might be a better use of that first round pick than drafting Drake May. Dre, start Puka, Waddle, or Jacobs in the flex. Dear God, so many Waddle questions. But I will start Puka Nacua over Jalen Waddle. Just there's so much better of a floor at a very similar ceiling. I would trust Puka over Jalen Waddle. And I want to like Josh Jacobs. I really, really do. But I don't know what it is. I just can't. Like, I can't trust him as much as Puka, especially against Kansas City. I'll start Puka out of these three. Can't believe the Linsanity run that Purdy is on right now. He's a good quarterback, dude. He is a really good quarterback. In a perfect situation, in a perfect system with a bunch of weapons around him. It makes sense. He's really good. That's all I'll say about it. He is really good. And I did highlight him in that video to buy him a couple weeks ago before trade deadlines and before the playoffs and stuff, because his schedule is really nice for the rest of the year too. And yeah, Purdy's pretty good. Traded Nico and Demario Douglas for a first on a middling team. Well, you just absolutely won. Number one in my league and one in more of next year's class. Yeah, this is perfect to me. This is one of the ways that contenders continue to contend is by accumulating players in the offseason that have the potential to grow in value. And then when they do grow in value, you then cash out. And then you cash out for these firsts. And then you draft rookies that have the ability to grow in value again. And then you either cash out or you have amazing production from that rookie. One of the two. So to me, this is absolutely amazing. I would trade Nico for a first anyway right now. But the fact that you're number one in your league and you're able to get this deal done is fantastic to me. Awesome job, Tyson. Awesome job. You have picks 1, 3, and 4, and the team would pick 2 needs another quarterback as well. We really want Marvin Harrison Jr. and Caleb, but I'm afraid to call pick number 2's bluff. So how do we game this? Could you move from 4 to 2, and then that solidifies you Marvin Harrison Jr. and Caleb Williams? And then can you trade away 103, pair with another quarterback to then get up and get into the elite tier of quarterbacks again? So then by this time next year, instead of having Anthony Richardson, Kirk Cousins, Bryce Young, Russell Wilson, Caleb Williams, and Drake May, instead you have Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams, insert top 8 or top 7 quarterback here. Like, that grouping would be so much better, not only because then you would have more roster spots to then take shots on other players that can gain value for you, but your star power in your starting lineup would be way better for you in an 8-team league. That would then allow you to compete massively than it would be if you had just Anthony Richardson and Caleb Williams and a bunch of quarterback 2s. I think that's the play. I dropped something. I think that's the play, Matthew. But yeah, so if anybody has any more questions or anything like that, you can drop a comment in the replay of this chat. If anybody has any more specifics about trades that they want to get done or anything like that, Matthew, for sure. If you have any more specifics on how to work some deals to get to 102, to move 103, to do all that kind of stuff, drop it all down in the comments, because I answer all of the YouTube comments on the DLF side. So drop those down in the comments if you have any more questions. And thank you guys so much for hanging out for the past 90 minutes. It was so much fun to get back into the Fridays with Addison schedule again. But for the remainder of the year, Fridays will still be John Paulson and I. But then after the season ends, and we don't have to make start-sit decisions or any of that anymore, then I will continue to do this. I don't know if I'm going to do this on a weekly basis throughout the entire offseason, or maybe bi-weekly, or maybe I'll pick and choose some of the when it becomes weekly or when it becomes bi-weekly based on the time of year, with hot spots for like rookie content and stuff. But we'll definitely get back to doing more of this centralized live stream AMA stuff for you guys once January hits. But again, glad to get back into it and help you out. Think Goddard is missing for sure. They start. I would not play Dallas Goddard this week. I think there's too much risk. Um, to get Goddard off the IR. I would not start Dallas Goddard this week, and I would, but I don't want to drop a better player. Matt, you got some moves to make? Yeah, dude, you got a bunch of fun moves that you can make for sure, though, dude. You have a bunch of awesome assets for sure. But yeah, so like I said, guys, appreciate you guys hanging out for the past 90 minutes. Again, if you have any more questions, just drop them down in the comment section on the replay of this video, and I can answer those questions and comments through text, I guess, by replying to you guys. But appreciate all you guys hanging out. Hopefully, you guys have an amazing weekend watching football here in a little over an hour. Enjoy the football on Sunday. Hopefully, you guys win your matchups if you want to win them. Lose your matchups if you want to lose them, if you're rebuilding and stuff. But we appreciate you guys, and we'll see y'all next week. See you.